Hello all, it's Jaames Johnson, aka Sulfur Blade, and I am here with a review video of Humankind. So, if you're a gamer, and unless you've been under a rock, you will have realized that Humankind, which is made by the developers who've made Endless Legends, Endless Space, Endless this, Endless that, Amplitude Studios. This is kind of what they consider their Magnum Opus of games, which is basically a very serious contender to Civilization. One would say it's very strongly inspired by Civilization, to say the least. This game is a mixed bag of so many things to talk about, because the game itself is very complex, but in a simple way. So the game's tutorials itself will tell you a very accurate thing in that at first most of the game mechanics can seem very overwhelming, and that is very true. At first the game mechanics are very overwhelming, partially because they basically took the Civilization recipe and said, we'll keep 75% of it, and then we'll toss in 25% of our new recipe, but in a manner that completely changes how the pace and flow of the game goes, to make you, maybe a person who's played a lot of Civ, be like, what the fuck is going on? and that's truly where you are with Humankind. I don't know where to start. There's so many things I want to talk about as far as this review goes with Humankind, but I want to make sure that I cover most of the bases and get most of the things talked about. So obviously this is similar to the Civilization franchise. Let's just get that horse out of the gate. Yes, it's very heavily inspired. It's in ways a ripoff, and in many ways it's its own very good version. But it's not. But it is. But it's not. That's what you're gonna. That's gonna summarize this review, in that I like it and I hate it all at the same time. This is one of the most perplexing games I've ever come across. So it's obviously a far better Civ 6 than Civ 6 is. But what it feels like is that this game would have made a fabulous Civ 6 if it was still in development. So right now, the game in its release date feels like what Civ 6 should have been in a very alpha state. I mean, the game is totally out of balance. There are balance issues all over the place with this game. Where do I start with the balance issues? Well, let's start. We're in the nomadic era right now. Here we are in the nomadic era. The nomadic era is so flippin' cool. This is maybe one of my favorite parts about this game, is the nomadic era. Which, here you are. This is not a settler. I can't found a town. Which when I started up the game and I'm like, do I want to found a town here? And then I stared at the screen and I'm like, what do I do? Where's the town settlement button? I kept hovering over this looking for how do I settle a town? And there's this here that says I can claim territory, but it says I need a minimum of 5 influence, and I look up here and I've got no influence. Well, how do I generate influence? And I just looked at this screen for like 10 minutes confused before I even finally decided, well, I guess I'll move around and find out what's going on. It took 10 minutes before I actually moved the character because I'm so trained to figure out where to place my first settlement because of civilization, and I was just at a loss as to what the hell should I do here. Well, the fact that you have to wander around as a nomadic tribe is such a cool feature. It's new. It's cool. But at the same time, it's also a problem. You can wander around this map, and you can find the goodie huts. That's basically what this is an era of finding these goodie huts. Food, for instance, this is a food goodie hut. This is a really good goodie hut, and it's a... but it's not the goodie hut that you want, but it is the goodie hut you want. So this is going to be very confusing, I know. But
Delicious.
we're gonna grab the goodie
next
hut.
time, it might be better if you washed it first.
And you can see that we got more food, right? And if you fill up this whole food thing, you get another unit here. So in the Neolithic era, depending on RNG, you could end up filling up an entire hunting party. You could end up, if you get another unit and you send them off in two different directions and you let them try to fill up a hunting party, you could end up coming out of the Neolithic era with like 8, 9, 10, 11, maybe even a dozen scouts, which is cool. It really is, because coming out of the Neolithic era with a lot of free units, because these scouts are free units. They're upkeep free. They don't cost any upkeep. They're not the best warriors. They're pretty frail, but when you have 3 or 4 of them that you can fill up an army with, they can hold off a fairly sizable army of more advanced things in combination with a city. So the Neolithic era it's important for generating a decent starting army, because when you transition out of the Neolithic era into the Ancient era, every population matters seriously, and you don't have time, generally, you don't have time to build actual units to fight. And the units you build to fight use town population, so they take your town backwards immensely. If you have to build an early game fighting unit, that is such a blow when you need that industry, when you need that town to be building something else that actually matters for winning the game. So, from a balanced perspective, the fact that you can enter the Ancient era in such a wide variety of different manners. You could have a dozen of these scouts. You could have bad luck and you could find like no food, but maybe you find most of the knowledge stars, and you manage to fill up the knowledge stars to transition out, and then okay. Let's walk this back a little bit. To get out of the Neolithic era, you need to generate a population of 5 population, or you need to pick up the necessary knowledge stars, or you need to pick up the necessary hunter stars. Any one of those ways will get you a star, which will progress you to the next era. Generally, the easiest way to do so is through the population means. And generally, if you are the first to get the population, you may or may not want to actually rush out and grab your culture. But you do want to be the first to grab the culture, because this is the other part of this game that has such a balance issue. And that's that there is a specific culture here in your ancient era, the Harappan culture. This culture is absolutely overpowered. The AI will make a beeline for this thing. It's the first culture picked in every single game I've played to date. Be it me picking it or the AI picking it. Both the player and the AI are well aware that this culture is overpowered. And this culture is so overpowered, it can, if you don't get it, you could find yourself quickly on the losing end of a CPU snowball, where the CPU snowballs so powerful and gets so far ahead of you so fast that you have to completely change how you're going to win the game to becoming completely militaristic. This is a game where you can win through other means, but it does, if you're going to win through non-military means, what happens in the ancient era and the Neolithic era really matter. If you have a bad Neolithic and ancient era start, you might as well just start figuring out who's got the best militaristic civs, because you're going to be bonking some heads. Because trying to come back from the AI getting the Harappans and just spiral, just they get so out of control. They get so, population is king in this game. And if you are the Harappans, you could generate so much population in the early game that just snowballs. And it even snowballs for the AI. It's hard for the AI to screw up when they get this culture. All right, so I've gotten that glaring problem with the game sorted out in this review. I really wanted to hammer on the overpowered Harappan culture causing the game to snowball out of control issue. Now, what's next? Well, then there's the switching of cultures every era. It's a neat idea, but it is so goddamn immersion breaking. Granted, it allows you to change streams. Maybe you are getting your butt kicked by the computer. Maybe you do need to go militaristic. Well, you can quickly go from, maybe you went completely science cultures, and all of a sudden you switch streams to go military culture because your science game plan wasn't working. Or maybe you went cultural civs, and maybe your cultural game plan wasn't working. So you can switch streams and you can try different things. And that's cool, but when you take some of these very, very bizarre paths, like going from the Egyptians and then becoming the Japanese, and then from the Japanese becoming the Franks, and then becoming the, it's just so immersion breaking. It's and then some of the different cultures at some of the different levels and why they're available at certain levels just makes you scratch your head. Like, some of the late game cultures are like, what? And then some of the early game cultures, well, most of the early game cultures are fairly early game, but it does start to get head scratching at some points. Anyway, Right. So there's the culture issue. Moving on from that. Oh, I completely skipped over the fact that this game has a lot of issues with some people even getting it to actually work. So when I downloaded the game, because I actually I pre-purchased this game, and I actually forgot that I pre-purchased this game, and so there it was. Well, I was looking at an article, and it was like, hey, Humankind is out. I'm like, oh shit, that's right. I really want to play that game. So I went to buy Humankind, and it's like, it's already in your library. And I'm like, did I actually pre-purchase this? Which was a bit of a head scratcher, because I rarely pre-purchase games, but evidently I pre-purchased this one. That's how much I knew that I'd probably like this game. So I went ahead and evidently pre-purchased it almost 6 to 8 months ago. So long enough ago that I completely forgot about it. But with that being said, here it is. I get it loaded up, I go to play it, and crash. And crash, and crash, and crash, and crash. And you look... You do the typical things that you do. You look up on the forum, find what other people have been having the issue, figure out, is it a driver issue, is it this issue, is it that issue? And so I went through about 5 hours of that before I finally got it to work, but I did get it to work. I don't think those types of issues should be held up against... I don't think a game should be judged off of the technical aspects in a review. Though I will mention it in this review just to forewarn you that you could end up with that situation, but that's as much as it should warrant in a review. I think a review should be based off of the merit of how goddamn fun the game is, and not if your particular chicken soup recipe of computer, be it an AMD card and a NVIDIA card, or an AMD, or excuse me, an Asus motherboard, or an Intel motherboard, or whatever combination of hardware you have works or doesn't work. There's so many combinations these days that you're always going to have these types of issues with games, and to put, let's just say, sometimes a game gets far too big of a black eye by people whining about the fact that they couldn't get it to play on release. And Steam reviews can very much get skewed with crap like that, which then completely ruins the narrative 3 or 4 or 5 months later when you're looking to buy the game because you didn't get it on release, and you're wanting to know, is the game fun or not? And generally all of those technical errors have been fixed by then, and you just take a look at, well, is it extremely positive reviews? Is it mixed reviews? Is it negative reviews? And if the release launch reviews were so skewed by technical issues, people whining that their game kept crashing, then you don't know if the game is good or not. So that's why I review games. I reviews on my games on whether or not they're fun or not. I don't give a shit about the technical crap. Alright, with that being put out of the way. Right. This game is certainly would have made a much better Civ 6 than Civ 6 is. However, the game is just way out of balance, and there's some things that just don't make a lot of sense. One of the things for me that doesn't make a lot of sense, let's see if I can find intern. If I can find some animals here, and just give you a general quick look at what the combat is like in this game. So I love the war features. how wars are won, I think that's great, but the combat itself, I think, is rather lacking.
We move. Onward.
Rivers can be a bit of a hassle, as you can see every time you... Oh, yeah, I love these. So, you get these event pop-ups. This is maybe my favorite thing about this game. You get these all the time, and they're just awesome. I love these event pop-ups, where it makes you do a little bit of having to think. It makes you actually feel like you are, in fact, the leader of this civilization, and you are constantly being posed with decisions like this. And this is great. So yesterday the tribe came across a vast tract of wild grain. The stalks swaying in the breeze like the wind playing over golden waters. The ground down grain could feed the tribe twice over, but one of the tribe elders had another idea. Instead of pounding the seeds into flour, she suggests planting half of them so the grasses may return next summer. It is a curious idea, at odds with the nomadic life, but perhaps a harbinger of the future. What should you do? So we could plant, which means that we would get 25% less cost in domestic research cost when we can start researching, which requires being in the next era. Or we could get +2 food when we create our outpost, which will then, again, lead us on to the next era. Personally, I find grind to be more useful in this situation, but, you know, to each their own. People can go any way they want with that, because you're given the option to have to make the decision in the first place, and that's just awesome.
This way.
Oh, another thing that's awesome about this game is just look at the terrain. Look at the fact that I have to go around things. I can't, the terrain isn't flat. Civilization terrain is flat, with the exception of you'll have some mountain peaks that you can't cross. But in this game, the terrain is so wonderfully complex that it just creates wonderful choke points, and the terrain becomes a new strategic element, and that is a huge plus for this game. At the same time, you of course have the downfall of this game, and we're about to see that shortly. As long as he doesn't run too far away.
If you learn nothing else, you could learn what killed them.
Alright, might take another turn. Alright. What a confusing situation. How much... Probably... No, I have to go around the terrain to get to that. So we might as well hit him. Yeah! So here's the combat. Here's what I wanted to show you. This is what combat is like. Generally, I will go with instant resolution, but instant resolution can also cause its own problems, in that you could get some pretty dumb results because of instant resolution. So we'll fight this out manually to show you how this actually works. So now you choose where you want your guys to go in these starting spots, which right now they've been pre-put into good enough spots. We'll just start it. Alright, now combat is beginning, and we have to fight this mammoth. And I don't know if you're feeling what I'm feeling right now, but I'm just not a fan of this combat. This combat is very lackluster, to say the least. And sometimes it can be very frustrating. As you can see, we have a choke point issue that I didn't think we had. So I've already caused myself a problem. I'm just going to defend here. I'm going to send you over here. And now, maybe this is the strength of this combat, right? The human can get himself into a screwy situation, which is what I've done here. So you can use choke points and stuff like that in this combat to change the odds of a match. So that's a plus for this combat, but this combat is so lame.
Yes.
Alright, in the round. Alright, now we need to hide him.
Can't.
What do you mean you can't? Go here. You are going to defend. You are going to defend. And now, we haven't even finished this fight. So now, we're kind of stuck in this end turn situation where our units are locked into combat, which causes a whole lot of other wonkiness in that if you have, like, say, other units that are in this general area, they'll get locked into combat. You would think that they'd be available in the combat, but they're not. They're just magically made invisible and you can't use them. But they're still locked into this situation, so you can then you can't utilize them in the following turns to move, say, elsewhere. So combat in and of itself in this game is got a lot of issues. A ton of them. So we'll jump back into this battle just to get it finished.
Earth gives us strength.
And there, we killed a woolly mammoth, which is cool, because killing the woolly mammoth gets us stuff, like food and influence, which is wonderful, because that's what we need to do to get out of this, this Neolithic era and into the next era. And then we get another one of these great pop-ups. In the distance, a thin cord of smoke cuts into the clear blue skies. Fire, calling a few tribesmen. You run... Now, while these events are great, some of these events also can be their own worst nightmare. So we're a Neolithic tribe right now. We don't know what a building is. We're wandering around. We're a hunter-gatherer group. We don't have settlements. We're not at that stage technologically. But here we get this event. In the distance, a thin cord of smoke cuts into a clear blue sky. Fire, calling a few tribes. When you run closer, the smell of cinder bark and burning pine growing stronger with each footfall. The spy, dancing flames, and suddenly find yourself on the edge of the settlement on fire. Settlement. We're on the edge of a settlement. We're in the nomadic times. What the hell is a settlement? But anyway, many of the structures are ablaze, but even with the smoke and flames, you can see these abodes are marvels of craftsmanship. You are about to direct your men to put out the fires with loose soil, when you see short, shadowy figures running away. Youths. They could become part of your tribe if you give chase now. But that would mean losing these secrets of construction. What is your choice? Do we hunt down the children, or do we put out the fire? we're gonna hunt down the children. Alright, which allows us to actually, I believe we're the first culture, or we're the first group to actually get through to choose a culture. So, no, we're not. Look, the hairpins have already been chosen. My point exactly! This culture is beelined by the AI every single time. And this culture is so overpowered that it can really cause things to spiral out of control quickly. And we have a good example of that happening here. Alright, so I've got to show the combat. We've talked about the hairpin culture issue. We've talked about just that there's a whole lot of balance issues. Is the game fun? Yes, the game is fun. Oh, there is another balance. There is another very wonky balance issue I want to warn you about. And that is the difference in playing the game in standard pace compared to slow pace. So, like in Civilization, you could slow down the paces of the game so that there's more time spent in each era. Or you would think that is how it works. Well, because this game works so much differently, when you choose a slow-paced game, you find your game ending in the industrial era. Literally, when you start to make discoveries like railroad and electricity, is the point in which, on a slow game, the game is coming to an end. Where if you play on a non-slow-paced game, on a standard slow-paced game, you get much farther beyond, technologically wise, than that. That is a serious balance issue. So again, this game is plagued with balance issues. Everywhere you look, there's balance issues. It really feels like this would have made a wonderful Civ 6 if said Civ 6 was still in an alpha phase and the folks with Sid Meier's team would then play test what is a great potential. This game has tons of potential, but in its current state, it needs people like the Spiffing Brit to tear it apart, because this game can be torn apart. This game is so balancedly out of whack. It needs serious playtesting. It needs more time in the oven. It should not be released right now. It's an amazing game, don't get me wrong, but it's an amazing game that's completely and utterly jacked and totally out of whack. Right, so I talked about that issue with if you're playing longer games like the Never Ending and the slow version, things get really wonky and weird. It feels like the game currently is most balanced out around a standard game, the 300 turn game, which in and of itself, the 300 turn game feels so fast. You could sit down and play this game on the 300 turn setting. You could be done in a good long one night marathon and be done with it, which maybe is good, but we're going through an entire civilization's lifespan, and it really feels like it goes by too quickly. You couple that with the fact that the other game versions are completely out of balance, and you got a serious problem with the game right now. Alright, so I think I've covered most of the biggest issues with the game. Now let's talk about some of the strengths of the game. I already pointed out these wonderful. We already saw the wonderful pop-ups. Another part of this game that I completely love, that I totally adore, is the narrator. The narrator of this game does such a great job. He's got such a wonderful dry wit. And he says the most interesting and comical things as you move on to the next era or as you make certain decisions. He's always interjecting a little bit of humor into the game, and it is a nice touch. Really is. That and the diplomacy. So the diplomacy is a two-edged sword. The diplomacy in a lot of ways is lackluster, though how the wars are dictated, the war exhaustion, the war support is great. Maybe one of the best features of this game. If you could take the war support feature out of this game and put it into every Civilization game ever going forward, that would be just a wonderful thing that this game has created that can then move this genre of game forward, and that is the war support. The war support is really good, but the diplomacy itself, all of the other diplomatic options are watered down, lukewarm. There's not much diplomacy in the game, and the AI itself sucks at diplomacy. The AI in this game is so horribly aggressive. The AI are murderous, cutthroat fiends that will kill you any opportunity they get. They don't act civilized. You can't trust the AI. Even if you're supposed to trust the AI, you still can't trust the AI. Just the diplomacy in this game really sucks. But then it doesn't, because when you go to the diplomacy screen and you see your avatar there and he says something, and you see the AI's avatar there and she says something or he says something, and they're having conversations about the choice that you make in the diplomacy screen, it's a wonderfully immersive addition to diplomacy. So the avatars, the diplomatic avatars, and their little lines of speech that they say is great. The watered down diplomacy features are horrible, but the actual war support concept of the game is stellarly good. So again, this game is an enigma. It's got great things and it's got horrible things all wrapped up into the same goddamn thing, and it drives you nuts. It's like, I love this! I hate this! I love this! I hate this! And that's what Humankind boils down to in a nutshell. This game is a game that makes you say, God, I love it, and I hate it all at the same time. Alright, and that reminds me of one more thing I need to show you about Humankind before I end this review. I know this review has been a little bit lengthy at this point. Let's go ahead and start a new game. This is another problem I find with this game. And another great thing I find about this game. So let's look at what are the options here. We could play on a huge world with a custom world shape where you can choose how chaotic or whatever this is great. This part of it's great, like land percentage 30% or 90%, number of continents. I mean, amazing. The map generation features here are just out of this world good. This is awesome. Like lakes, I can. How often are the lakes? How big are the lakes? I love these features. This is great. Now, where it starts to go sideways is here we got difficulty, right? We can play on Hamlet, Town, Metropolis. This should be the difficulty. And it is kind of the difficulty, but you want to know where the real difficulty is? Which is, again, a huge flippin' balance issue, is when we go back up here to these competitors. When you look at the competitors themselves, you find that you have advanced competitors. What does that mean? What is an advanced competitor? Come on, game. Okay. They retaliate under extermination of aggressor. +2 strength, emblematic, +2 combat strength, militarist, cool-headed, advanced. This score determines the difficulty level of your AI's persona. Each bias and strength has a value in points that will modify that score. So advanced is better than normal. So this guy is going to have more modifications to these traits than a normal guy would have. So let's look at Agamemnon. Look, another advanced. Let's look at Ancestor. Oh, another advanced. Wei Long, another advanced. Beowulf, another advanced. Oh, hey, here we got a normal person. Alyssa is normal. This score determines the difficulty level of AR persona. Each bias and strength has a value in points that will modify the score. Now we have an expert, which is even stronger than advanced. Oh, another advanced. An expert. Advanced. Expert. 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 Advanced. Expert. Normal. Oh, Lucy's normal. Alyssa and Lucy are normal. Victor, advanced. So you're telling me that of the AI personas we could choose to play with in our game, if we want to have a game that doesn't have AIs that are super out of balance, we have to play a game that only has 2 goddamn people in it? And that's another part about this I hate, is look at how hard it is to try to choose who you want here. I mean, if you happen to choose the person over here, then it flips back and you just got to go back and forth, and it's just a freaking nightmare. Who wants to play a Civilization type game with you and 2 other individuals? Pretty lame. So either you just need to not use Lucy and Alyssa, because let's face it, they're going to get raffle stomped against the advanced versions. So I guess my suggestion is just go with the advanced guys as your, I think she's an expert. Yeah, do away with the experts and make your AI all advanced. So at least there's some, I don't know, level playing field. When you're putting certain AIs above other AIs, that's a problem. That's a balance problem right there. So the game, just from the beginning, from the get-go, is out of balance because the AIs themselves are not balanced. They don't start at an evens point. And yeah, I hear people saying, but Civilization has the same thing. You know, if you play Civ 5 and you're playing Poland, you're going to have a huge advantage over somebody playing, let's say, Washington. Sure enough. I understand that to an extent. However, those huge advantages are typically metagamed by the human, meaning Poland is an exception. So the AI playing Poland is always going to get the extra policy every time an era changes. There's no special human influence that's going to make sure that the Polish traits are going to be not used. Like, for instance, let's say you play England and you have the extra spies. Well, those extra spies, they have to be told to do something. And what they do can be, in some situations, much stronger towards winning the game than other circumstances. And the AI might not utilize them the best way. Like with England, again, you get, the ship of the line in Civ 5, and that ship of the line is a very strong unit that you can completely decimate a particular era, and if you're a player, you can utilize that unit to its maximum advantage. So certainly there are some civilizations that are really good, and they're really good because the player has the ability to make them real good. By and large, most civs in Civ 5 in general have the same normal stupidity level, right? They function off of the same general parameters, with the exception of there may being loyalty and aggression differences, which is what I originally thought here when I didn't look at these guys. I figured these guys would just have different personalities. But no, they don't just have personality differences. They have giant differences in just how good they are, because the game artificially makes them better, which is something that should be part of the difficulty setting here. This is where you should be discovering difficulty, not in the competitors that you're choosing. I got completely raffled stumped my first game because I had a bunch of expert guys in here. Not to mention I had no idea what cultures were better than others. And so I had an expert AI who got a hold of the hairpins, and things just skyrocketed out of control instantaneously. I mean, I was like, what happened? After playing a few times, I've gotten better. But, yeah, the game suffers. The game suffers from the game just not being in balance. Alright, so I think I've hit most of the key points of this game. Humankind is a great game. Don't get me wrong. I know I've said a lot of I've said a lot of things. I've criticized it a lot because I'm a highly critical person. I rarely do I look at a game and say that's the perfect game. I never do that. No game has ever been perfect. There's been a couple games that have been so good that I never had a point to criticize them, which is about as close to perfect as you're going to get, I suppose. But those are a very, very, very rare breed of game. This is not one of those games that avoids the criticism. This game most definitely gets lots of criticism. But that's because it is a game that has purposely put itself into this situation. It has purposely used the civilization recipe. It has purposely used the civilization features. And why wouldn't you? They're great features. It's a great recipe to success. And it's purposely made changes to that recipe. And a lot of those changes have been great changes. Some of those changes have been not so great changes. This game has really pushed civilization further. In my opinion, this game has done more to push civilization than any of the civilizations ever pushed civilization. This is everything John Schaefer's At the Gate should have been. John Schaefer's At the Gate was a steaming pile of bullcrap. I can't even begin to tell you just how much of a disappointment that game is. That's not even worth fucking talking about. It's so bad. This game is 100 times better than John Schaefer's At the Game. This game is on par with other games in the Civilization franchise. This game truly can duke it out and go 9 rounds with another Civilization game. But most of the Civilization games don't have glaring balance. Well, they have some balance issues, sure. But not at the core of the game like this one does. This one has so many balance issues that it's just very frustrating. Because if they could bring this game into balance, it's a strong contender to being one of the best Civilization games of all time. Is it the best? No. For me, that's Civ 5 with everything. Civ 5 with Brave New World, Gods and Kings is the cream of the Civilization world at this point in time. Civ 2, prior to that, was the cream of the crop. Civ 3 just went off a deep end and just went in the wrong direction from Civ 2. Civ 4 got a little bit better. Civ 5, when it first released, got a little bit better, but it wasn't better than Civ 2. With the religious expansion, it got a little bit better, but it still wasn't as good as Civ 2. And then when you threw on Brave New World, it was like, wow, yeah, this is it. This is the game that finally makes me forget Civ 2 as being my Civilization game to now having a new king of the crop. Well, where does Humankind fit into that discussion with me? I don't know if I put it ahead of Civ 2. I really don't feel like it's there. However, is it better than Civ 4? I think it could be. So for me, Humankind, even with all of its glaring issues, right now it feels like it's number 3 on the totem pole with, the complete game of Civ 5, then Civ 2, then Humankind, with the other civilizations underneath. And that's pretty good. Now, granted, that's my pecking order. Different people play the Civilization franchise for different things. Some people really liked Civ 3 because they liked the military version of the game more than the non-military version of the game. They like to be able to unit stack and have big fights. I could care less about fighting in the game. I could care less about unit stacking. In fact, I prefer to not have unit stacking. I prefer where just one unit is on one tile and that's that. I think it's a nice compromise in Civ 5 where you can have a non-military unit and a military unit on the same tile. Works well. But having a bunch of units on the same tile usually just causes problems. And you can see that in Humankind. Humankind attempted to be able to unit stack. But then it goes into the battle, and that unit stack then fans out into non-unit stacked fight, and the fight itself is kind of lackluster. So they kind of tried to, I don't know, bridge the gap between the two various different ways of playing, between the unit stacking in the Civ 3s. I think it was Civ 3 that had, or was it Civ 4 that had? One of those two had unit stacking. Anyway, you could see where they went with that. So, different people like Civilization for different reasons, but for me personally, I like this game. I think being a number 3 on a list of Civilization games is very respectable. We're talking about some of the best games ever made. As far as I'm concerned, the Civilization franchise is creme de la creme of gaming content. And for this game to get up there close to being on the top of the list is pretty damn impressive. So, Amplitude Studios and their Magnum Opus, they should be happy with what they have here. They should be proud of what they have here. At the same time, they've got a lot of room for improvement. They have a lot of balance features that need to be worked on. And if this game ever gets properly balanced, my God, this could be the Civ killer. You know how they're always talking about the MMO that's going to take down World of Warcraft? Well, in this genre, this could be the game that takes down Sid Meier's Civilization. But right now, it's not that game. Anyway, I'm Jaames Johnson, aka Sulphurblade. This is my content. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If so, please leave a like and subscribe. And until the next time, all, peace.